What is up, and welcome to yet another edition of the Bruin Bible. Spring is here. We are getting very fired up for some spring game talk about our UCLA Bruins. And who better to join me than the Madman? It's kind of a crossover episode between draft is in session and the UCLA Bruins. Jamal, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening?
Will the Thrill, great to see you, my brother, as always. And, we have such a blast on Draft is in Session, but there's something about the Bruin Bible that feels like home. And so I'm excited about doing this with you tonight.
Dude, it's the first podcast we ever got together on, so it does hold a special place in our hearts. What I mean by, crossing over, too, is we are going to be doing a 5-round draft. Jamal gets 5 picks. I get 5 picks of the top 10 players we're most excited about coming into spring ball. There's going to be, 2 very obvious faces in there. There's going to be a lot of transfers and some guys that maybe just become all first-team Pac-12 type players when all is said and done throughout this year. So I think this is going to be a really fun one. We have not shared our list with one another. For instance, if Jamal were to pick somebody, I can't take that same player. So we've got to make sure it's 10 total guys flowing. But yeah, let's get this thing rolling, dude. You are the guest here. I got to give you the first pick. Madman, who is your first selection in the first Bruin Bible draft?
Will, obviously there's sort of an obvious person, but let me be, slightly curveball and not be so obvious with the beginning. For me, it's Mr. Zach Charbonnet is the guy that I'm kind of most excited about this year, especially when you talk about just the absolute productivity and performance and impact that he had last year on the field. And when you couple that with his draft stock being so high and many people kind of questioning, was it the right move for him to come back? But he came back because of unfinished business and for his love of UCLA and his love of the college experience and wanting to get the most out of this season. And so given his physical running ability and the fact that there's no more Britton Brown to share the backfield, I'm really excited about Charbonnet as the premier feature back, and let's see what the future holds.
Charbonnet is an easy pick, too. I mean, this is the guy that I feel has the chance to really make an impact on a national level. He came into the Bruins last year, highly coveted transfer from Michigan, 202 carries, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns on the ground, 24 catches. I did my research on him on PFF. He was one of 4 rushers in the NCAA last year at over 200 carries and no fumbles. Like, this guy is explosive. Not to mention, dude, 6'1", 220, and just the shiftiness and the power he possesses. I mean, they call this guy the Terminator for a reason, right, Madman? And
absolutely.
He had the second highest percentage of forced missed tackles in the history of the Pac-12 through PFF. Number 1, Zach Moss, 2019 of Utah. Number 2, Zach Charbonnet. Like, it is that much of a challenge to tackle this guy in the open field. We're doing our NFL draft running backs preview tomorrow. And the fact I'm looking at these guys and, there are some very solid dudes, but, you can call me a biased, a homer, whatever you want to say. If Charbonnet actually came out for the draft this year, I think he's my number 1 running back. What do you think about that?
Will, I think there's no doubt about it. And we've talked about this on a number of different platforms, both online as well as offline. To me, Charbonnet reminds me of this hybrid between Marshawn Lynch and Jerome Bettis. He has the physicality, the upper body strength, but then also those incredibly quick feet. And one of the things that most surprised me about Charbonnet in last year's spring practice series in the spring game was not just his ability to run through people, but his ability to run around people and his ability to run by people. And that the latter two were the things that were most surprising. And that was evident from the jump with that opening Hawaii game and just how spectacular he was in the non-conference, and then culminated late in the season, obviously, with some great performances, including the SC game where he just ripped through that 4-8 defense like it was nothing. And so I totally agree with you. He is the most NFL ready back of anyone that's in the draft right now. And a team like the Rams would have been such a perfect fit for Charbonnet to kind of be that hammer to complement that incredibly efficient as well as finesse passing game that the Rams exhibit. So a little bit of a missed opportunity there for him to be the hometown guy this year, but the Rams loss is the Bruins game.
And we love it as Bruins fans. We did not anticipate him coming back. Zach Charbonnet, just a solid first pick of this draft. You know, I really want to go in a different direction because I am really excited for what I'm about to see with this guy. And I'm hoping you don't take him with the third pick. But I got to go Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And this guy really put it together last year. We saw the version of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or at least getting to the version that we would have liked to have seen. You know, SC game, everything's breaking down for him. First two passes of that game are both intercepted from Dorian Thompson-Robinson. What does he do? He comes out cool, calm, and collected in the biggest rivalry game on the West Coast and leads UCLA to a huge comeback victory. What I love from DTR, 21 touchdowns last year, only 6 interceptions, so he's starting to cut down on the turnovers a little bit in that category. 2,400 yards passing. His completion percentage was the second highest of his career in a season last year. And then you couple that with the fact that we've seen flashes of the run game with him, you know, where he could be a strong candidate in the run game. He had over 5 games of over 65 yards in rushing last year. Like, that is just a huge weight off the shoulders. And we're going to need some of that too, because we don't have Britton Brown coming back. Charbonnet is going to be the main guy, right? So if you can have Dorian Thompson-Robinson picking up maybe a couple first downs here and there with his legs, that's just a it's a benefactor for your team. And we've talked about this, you know, fifth-year quarterbacks coming back for that extra year. We see it with Kenny Pickett. We've seen it with Burrow. Very different players, but we could be in for an all-time Bruin quarterback season with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And even though I had my eyes on some other dudes, and I know we're going to get into those guys later, it's a disservice to this podcast not to take DTR in the top 2. What do you think about DTR going number 2, man?
Yeah, Will, I mean, obviously it's sort of by default. It has to be, right? This season is going to be defined ultimately by DTR, and more so than any other player on this team. And I think that his return was expected on the LA Football Network. We had a lot of discussions about, you know, was he NFL ready? And, you know, the benefits of coming back for an extra year and putting it all together on film in a more consistent fashion. The ceiling with DTR has never been in question. He's an incredible playmaker. Obviously, you've listed the career statistics and last season's statistics, but beyond that, it's the spectacular play that he can sort of orchestrate and create something out of nothing, both with his legs as well as through the air. The question with DTR has always been, how low does the floor go? And can we sort of get that to be in a place where even when he is not on his A game, that his B game keeps you in contention to win ball games. And in years past, 1 mistake has become 4 mistakes, has become 11 mistakes, has become sort of losing a ball game. And what we saw in particular over the course of the second half of the season was, I think Chip did a masterful job early in the season where it wasn't all on him. When you really look at the UCLA breakdown of their season last year, they were most effective at the beginning of the season when they were running the ball over 60% of the time. They were at that 65% to 35% run-pass ratio and really had DTR work in the play action. And it was sort of a play action, Phillips, Dulcich, or then take off and run. It was a very simplified approach to what they needed to do, and it was very successful. And then gradually as the season went on, that turning point was the fourth quarter of that Stanford game when he dropped that dime to Phillips, 75 yards over the middle in that comeback. And then his ability to sort of lead the victory at Washington. And then those were all the steps in place to then ultimately sort of culminate with the signature performance of not just his career, but arguably any Bruin quarterback's career in that game against SC. And so for me, this year represents his ability to A, be able to read defenses a little bit better, and B, have more trust in his third and fourth reads and be more NFL ready, and also show productivity with a new cast of characters, which is something that, again, the NFL salivates over, because it is the ultimate litmus test of correlation versus causation. Were you the cause of the success, or were you just the byproduct of the correlation of all the talent around you? And that's why this season is so significant for him, and I think ultimately he's going to come through with flying colors. You have to remember that I think in his mind, and in the mind of Chip Kelly, and in the mind of Bruin fans, last year was an 8-4 season. 2 of those losses, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was not on the field at the end of that game. Oregon on that last drive when we had to go to Garbers, and then arguably the worst performance of the season that the Bruins had against Utah, no DTR. And so if you think that, hey, if we have good DTR for those 2 games, and those 2 games are victories, guess what? That's a 10-2 season, 8-1 in the Pac-12 with a win over Utah and Oregon. UCLA would be in the Rose Bowl if good Dorian Thompson-Robinson was able to finish those games. And so if you can extrapolate that to this season, there is no reason why he is not pivotal to an ultimate Rose Bowl run.
And just the way he finished the year last year. I mean, you take out those first 2 passes against SC, the last 7 quarters of his season, 7 touchdown passes, over 150 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns. Like, could not have been more dominant to finish this year. And that's what gets me excited about this year coming up. All right, we've got the 2, obvious ones out of the way, Madman. This is where it starts to get interesting for the Bruin Bible. This is where it gets fun for me. I love hearing the guys you're high on. I've got some guys that I think you'll be shocked are on my list. Who is number 3 most exciting Bruin coming into spring practice for the 2022 season?
For me, Will, obviously there has to be something done around building chemistry for Mr. Dorian Thompson-Robinson in terms of who is he going to throw the ball to. The 2 leading receivers of last year, Kyle Phillips and Greg Dulcich, both of whom set the absolute combine world on fire, are both going to be steals for NFL teams and exceptional pros moving forward, but they are no longer there. And so who is going to take the mantle of wide receiver 1? And to me, the guy who has shown flashes of brilliance over the last few years, who I have called the Swiss Army knife of the Bruin offense in years past, but can he put it all together? And that's Mr. Kazmir Allen, is my number 3. Yep. Obviously, the incredible performance against SC, the 3 touchdowns, the kickoff return, the 2 great catches. He had that dramatic 45-yard catch down the sideline in the opener against Hawaii. He showed a lot of flashes in games against Washington and Arizona in moments where we really needed him, both in the backfield as well as in the receiving corps. To me, his ceiling ultimately could be someone that is in the mold of Percy Harvin in those great Florida Urban Meyer teams. The guy who can sort of get you some things out of the backfield, run those spread principles, as well as be your slot guy, as well as be your deep guy, sort of that X factor truly in a spread offense. And to me, Kaz Allen coming together and putting it all together as true wide receiver 1 with that 10-400 sprinter speed and the ability to sort of both run as well as receive, as well as have a dynamic impact in the special teams. To me, he is the 3rd most impactful player potentially for this season. And I think he's going to need to be for UCLA to ultimately be successful and go where they want to go.
Well, man, you took my guy. I knew it was going to be a matter of which one of us got this choice. But I remember clearly, we are tailgating. This is the first time I met you in person. We are tailgating USC UCLA parking lot. We're all rooting for the Bruins in the parking lot. And we're just like, who needs to be, the standout player for UCLA to, make a big impact and win on the road at the Coliseum? I said Charbonnet. Charbonnet had a great game. Ryan said Greg Dulcich. Dulcich made some big plays, but there was nobody that called it more accurately than yourself with Kaz Allen. You go, Kaz Allen needs to be the guy today. And that is an understatement. He had 3 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's like the Randy Moss Thanksgiving Day game back in the day. That is basically what Kaz Allen did to the Trojans. And then he had the 100-yard kickoff return for a score. And like you said, we saw flashes of Kaz Allen just be explosive. The Hawaii game, opening game, he catches a nice contested 45-yard touchdown grab. First drive of the game, it's kind of UCLA feeling out if they can play on the same, playing level as a team that just won a national championship in LSU a couple years prior. 3rd and long, Dorian goes to the sideline, 27-yard catch to Kaz Allen, making a big play. This guy is a spark plug. He averaged, and it's, not the attempts we'd like to see. I think he should have been fed the ball more, to be honest. But in a small sample size, he averaged over 11 yards per carry. He had a touchdown on the ground last year, and he was well over 17, 18 yards a catch when it came to, getting the ball. This guy is explosive as hell, and he led the Pac-12 in average of kickoff return last year with 29 yards of kickoff return. And this goes back to just Chip Kelly. When you think of the Oregon football teams, who is one of the faces of those teams that you think of? And for me, that's DeAnthony Thomas.
Yes.
This is our version of DeAnthony Thomas. Yes. And we need to feed this guy in volume to see what he can do, because I'm telling you, every time this guy touched the ball last year, I either got up off my couch or something good happened. Like, that is the excitement Kaz Allen brings to the football field playing for UCLA. So, Madman, that is an ideal 3rd pick, man. I'm super fired up. You took Kaz Allen. I think he's got a chance to be a potential star in the Pac-12 this year if everything goes his way. What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? We interrupt this podcast to bring you our new deal that we have. We are excited to announce that we have partnered with a number of different sports books to give you the best options for all your betting needs. For our California listeners, betus.com is the perfect place to bet on the NFL draft, the NBA, or any sport that you are interested in. Get a 125% bonus on your first deposit with our link. If you live in a betting state, then be sure to check out our deal with DraftKings, FanDuel, or BetMGM. Plenty of free money out there with your first free deposit. In order to get our special deal, you have to type in Bruin Bible. You have to click on the link located in the description or go to LAFB betting offers. Win big with these amazing promotions and bet safely. Now back to the podcast. Okay, pick number 4. There's a couple areas I can go with this. And I don't want to reach too early, but I think the guy I'm going to go with, because of just how bad our secondary was last year. I've been, researching Bruins transfers as much as anyone. According to Rivals, Mike Farrell, this guy did have some terrible things to say about Charbonnet coming back. He listed him as the 10th best running back returning next year, which is an absolute joke. But he was right in one area when I looked up the top transfers. He had the best corner transferring to a Power 5 school. That was Azizi Hearn from Wyoming, the former University of Arizona, Wyoming corner. 106 career tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, a touchdown, 14 passes deflected. He had an 82 PFF grade as a corner last year, which would have ranked the 5th highest in the Pac-12. We need secondary help more than just about anything. And, any UCLA fan can tell you that. Quinn Lake was great. He was in and out of the lineup for 3 to 4 years there. Jay Shaw kind of put it together last year. Outside of that, it was just a miserable secondary. So I think Azizi Hearn coming to the Bruins, just having a solidified starter on the back end that's proven they can be exceptional at the Division I level. I think that's just a huge win for UCLA, and a guy that I'm really excited about watching in spring practice. Give me your take on Azizi Hearn.
I completely agree, Will. And what I like about Azizi Hearn is a guy who has a track record of success, maybe not in what we would characterize as mainstream Division I football, but certainly fringe Division I football. And I think sometimes what happens in the transfer portal with UCLA in the secondary is that we get guys that have such gigantic chips on their shoulder where it fuels them from an aggressiveness perspective, makes them great at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage, in the blitz game. They've become very physical in terms of bump and run coverage and press coverage, and they're great when it comes to sort of tackling the receivers post-catch. But the problem is the other end of that sword is that they take way too many chances because they're looking for the home run play. And if you look at what UCLA needs above anything else is just solid secondary play. We don't even need superstars. We just need guys that know where they need to be, understand leverage, understand how to defend both man as well as sort of zone concepts, multiple receiver concepts, and just have an understanding of being at the right place at the right time. Again, if you go back to UCLA's 4 losses, 3 of those losses can be directly attributed to not just poor secondary play, but absolutely reckless individual secondary play. And this is where the argument goes for McGovern, where you don't actually mind having the same scheme because it wasn't scheme. When you look at that Arizona State game and they gave up 4 plays of over 65 yards, when you look at that Fresno State game, especially in the fourth quarter, when they gave up 3 different 3rd and 20s in that game that ultimately led Fresno State to a victory. And then when you look at that Oregon game where that second quarter where Oregon was able to sort of stretch that lead and really made Anthony Brown look like a serviceable Division I quarterback. And that's really saying something, given what the rest of his season played out. All 3 of those ultimately ended up being losses, and all 3 of those ultimately ended up being losses due to just reckless secondary play. So if Azizi Hearn comes in there and just continues to demonstrate good habits, at Wyoming he demonstrated a lot of good habits in terms of being in the right position. He was in a tough conference in terms of being in a pass-heavy conference, in a tough system where the rest of Wyoming's defense wasn't very good and he had a lot on his shoulders. I think coming to UCLA is going to be a match made in heaven and really going to take things to the next level. And the reality of the situation is secondary play at UCLA is like refereeing a sport. They're doing well when you don't hear their name. Azizi Hearn will do very well if I hear very little of Azizi Hearn. We only, problems arise when these guys become household names. I don't want Josh Shaw to be a household name. I don't want Trez Knight to be a household name. That's bad when your secondary guys are your household names. And so it is sort of addition by subtraction when it comes to sort of the PR game with secondary players. And I think we got a really good one with Azizi Hearn.
Big corner, 6'1", 202 pounds. It's kind of the NFL prototype now, a little lengthier corner
Definitely.
coming out there. We just need him to be solid, and he's proven he can, play more than his share. An 80-plus grade in PFF and coverage is nothing, to scoff at. He's a very talented guy. I'm excited, and, I had to raise him up my list just because of how necessary our secondary was. When you recapped all the problems we've had last year in those games, the Fresno State one was the one that came to mind for me. It was like when Fresno State fans are claiming they own UCLA as we have not beaten them in like a decade plus or whatever it may be, that's where it hurts,
Yeah.
And Jay Kaner's a phenomenal quarterback, yada, yada. That was an embarrassing loss when you have the lead that late. So don't want to dry that one out too long. Madman, give me your third pick in the draft, dude. This is going swimmingly, I believe.
So, Will, this is where I'm going to kind of really throw the curveball and have a little bit of a shock factor, if you will. And I'm going to go with Keegan Jones.
Whoa.
Not even on my list. Why I'm going to go with Keegan Jones is the importance of A, the run game in Chip's system, and B, the importance of having 2 backs in the run game in Chip's system. And when you look at even the progression of UCLA between Britton Brown and Charbonnet, and we sort of go in years past before with Felton, and with Josh Kelly, and we always had kind of a 2-back system. And when you look at what Chip did at Oregon between Kenyon Barner and LaMichael James, and then DeAnthony Thomas, and Kenyon Barner, you always need a little bit of the thumper, and then you need the breakaway. And even those great USC teams of Reggie Bush and Lendale White, the Thunder and the Lightning, that's where really the bread and butter in Chip's offense comes into play. When you can effectively run the football through the spread concepts, that's when the RPO game comes into play. That's when you can sort of hit the tight end on different seams and misdirections. And then when a defense has to worry about the run game, tight ends running across the field like we did very effectively, and slot receivers running across the field, that's when you get burnt deep on a busted play. And so it all starts with this ability to be able to not only run the ball consistently, but be able to run the ball in a variety of ways. And while Charbonnet is so complete and such an incredible physical specimen, he is the thumper. And I think that we want to sort of make sure that he is fresh later in the year. We also want to make sure that he's sort of fresh in the key games. And we need to be able to have that explosive aspect to the run game. And I think DTR this year is really going to be out to prove that he can be a pocket passer and a guy who can make plays in the pocket. And I think he's going to run when he has to, but I don't think it's going to be as first in instinct as it has been in years past. So there is a gap there. And I think that for Chip's system to be truly effective, you need the 1-2. And Keegan Jones has all the ingredients to be the perfect complement to Zach Charbonnet, a 4.3 40. He's shown flashes over the last couple of years in the screen game where he's exploded. He's done some amazing things, albeit in garbage time, with some really burst runs. And I have a real eye on him as being the next sort of offensive star. If you can have Kaz and Zach and DTR, but you get Keegan in there as that two-headed monster, that's where you maintain and enhance your position as the number one offense in the Pac-12, both from a scoring as well as from a yards perspective.
I love the pick, and I did not have this on my radar for a guy to pick, but everything you laid out makes complete sense. Charbonnet, they need that guy to be rocking and rolling by the time they hit the stretch run at the end of the season. They need Keegan Jones to kind of pick up his part of that two-back system. This is a guy that's talented, like you mentioned, very quick, fast running back. He has over 41 career carries in his career, a touchdown to go with that, but we really have not been able to see him because this UCLA running back room has been loaded. And, maybe he can be the next guy that comes out for UCLA and becomes a dominant running back. And we've talked about the tight end room to an extent where it's just like you had Asiasi, you had Dulcich, you had, Caleb Wilson. Running back room is more impressive to me if you just go back to the rip. It's, Jonathan Franklin, Joshua Kelly, Demetric Felton, Britton Brown. I don't know why he's not at least getting on the radar of some of these draft teams. But he's a very solid running back. And, given how the running back position is commoditized in the current NFL, maybe he's not worth the pick, but I could see him making a roster, very talented guy, Charbonnet, a guy that we were going to put as our number one running back. So, just the lineage of UCLA running back continues to grow and grow, especially with a guy like Chip Kelly, who is as gifted in drawing up the run game that maybe anyone has ever been in the history of college football. That is Chip Kelly's bread and butter right there. So if Keegan Jones can't make it work in a Chip Kelly design run offense, it's just not going to work for him anywhere, in my personal opinion. So I'm really excited to watch him kind of expand and float. Keegan Jones, it's a hell of a pick. Madman always surprising me. Never knew that was going to come through. I love it, dude. I'm going to piggyback on that. And we lost Sean Ryan. Speaking of run game, speaking of protecting, opening up lanes for the run game, we lost Sean Ryan, who, outside of Colton Miller and, Ogden back in the 90s, it's hard for me to find a better left tackle prospect that UCLA's produced. This guy, the second he stepped on campus, was just a security blanket for the quarterback and whoever was playing there. He did a phenomenal job in Westwood. Really excited to see how Sean Ryan progresses. We got a transfer, and the more I looked into him, the more I started to like him. Raekwon O'Neal, Rutgers transfer, left tackle, big guy. He's 6'4", 305 pounds. And this guy has 21 starts to his name. And the thing that really got me excited, and granted, he did not make any all Big Ten teams, but he was all Big Ten honorable mention in 2020 and 2021. And we've done the offensive line draft prospect. Big Ten is probably the conference for offensive linemen. You think of the Iowas, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, the Ohio States, you name it. I mean, Rashawn Slater for your Chargers just came from Northwestern last year. Like, this is the conference when it comes to offensive linemen. And you plug in a guy like Raekwon O'Neal, he's just missing those lists. And that gets me excited because I know what it takes to make one of those all Big Ten teams. There's some years where the third team all Big Ten left tackle is still a first or second round pick because that is how deep that conference is when it comes to O-linemen. So Raekwon O'Neal, he brings experience to a offensive line that's going to sorely need it on that left-hand side. 21 starts, highly graded, and, nearly made a Big Ten team. And just in terms of importance, it's very similar to a ZZ Hearn pick for me. What's more important than the left tackle? We've talked about this. Quarterback's the most important position on the field. You can make a serious case to me that left tackle is the second most important position in all of football. What do you think about Raekwon O'Neal for my third pick?
I love the pick, Will, and I couldn't agree with it more. He's a guy I'm super jazzed about. You mentioned the 21 starts at Rutgers. You mentioned what it means to be a consistent starting offensive lineman in the Big Ten Conference. You mentioned what that pecking order looks like, obviously, with the offensive line factories that are Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, even to a certain extent, and so forth. But what also impresses me is just the guys he had to go up against, right? I mean, when you think about the Hutchinsons and when you think about all of these monsters at Penn State and you think about everyone that he had to go up against against Ohio State and in a very run-heavy offense that was Rutgers, right? So not all experiences are created equal. And the fact that he's got 21 starts in very run-heavy environments against absolutely elite defensive line competition, he is in prime position to be an all Pac-12 performer in a conference that is a little bit lighter in the trenches than, say, a Big Ten. And so I'm very excited about that. And the fact that, again, it's DTR's blind side. And if you really look at, where he has gotten hurt, where he has gotten dinged up, if you really look at the film, DTR, obviously much like many other right-handed college quarterbacks, when they are pressured, they will scramble right? You're going to scramble to your strong hand. But where DTR is different from the critical mass of quarterbacks that do that is he has a tendency through his improvisational skills to then reverse the grain and cut back left. Usually most guys will scramble right and then take off either down the sideline or buy some time or throw it away. DTR has a tendency to go right and then reverse field and go back left. And when you look at his injury history, in particular against Oregon, in particular a couple of games the year before in the 2020 season, that's where he's gotten hurt, is when he's sort of reverse field back left and he's fallen on a shoulder particularly hard, or he's gotten hit above sort of in the collarbone or higher where it's really sort of dinged him up. It's always been in sort of that reverse back left. And so to have someone really shore up the left side of that line and continue to be able to do so, not only opens up the run game and consistently enables yards there, but protects your most valuable asset and your most valuable player in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And so I think it's absolutely a home run get. And one of the gets that isn't getting as much buzz as it should, but Raekwon O'Neal will definitely be turning heads in this spring season.
Just a huge get, too. And that's what makes Chip so good. I don't know if you saw the official transfer portal rankings for different teams.
Yes.
UCLA has a top 5 transfer portal team. We're looking very sharp on that side of the recruitment. Madman, lead me off with your fourth pick. This is getting more fun by the pick in my eyes.
So the song that I think of Will, when I think of the fourth pick, is break me off a piece of that Doublemint gum. And it's because I love the Murphy twins.
Yeah.
Jason and Gabriel Murphy. It would be wrong of me, and I'm probably cheating here. So, call me on it. This is a Bruin show, and I'm behaving like a Trojan right now. I'm cheating. But so make sure you call me on that. But I love these two guys. When you talk about the other primary need is in pass rush. And especially when you look at the defensive scheme continuing to be 4-2-5, 4-2-5 is predicated on your four defensive linemen getting pressure on the quarterback without having to bring additional help. And when you look at when we were most excited about UCLA's defense, the first two games, was when the Agudes, the Daytona Jacksons, the Caliejos were getting to the quarterback and being very, very physical doing so. And now that we've lost Agude, and now that we've lost Jackson, and now that we've lost a lot of the depth, bringing the Murphy twins here from North Texas after a season where they combined for 70 tackles, 15 and a half sacks, and were absolute monsters in the pass rush is going to be absolutely key. And I think their ability to disrupt the pass rush and opposing offenses then sets up your secondary for success, where they don't have to take these wild chances, where they can stay at home and play really good, sound situational football, and you allow your linebackers to cover more ground in more of a Tampa 2 type of style, as opposed to having to constantly worry to sort of help out either in run support or in terms of getting pressure to the quarterback, and these guys are going to be running every which way. So I think the Murphy twins are going to play an absolutely paramount role in UCLA getting to that top 4 or 5 defense in the Pac-12, because that's really all we're looking for here, Will. We don't need the defense to be tops in the Pac-12. If this team is sort of 35th, or 40th nationally defensively and top 4 or 5 in the Pac-12, you're talking about a team that very realistically has double-digit win aspirations, and the Murphy twins are going to be paramount to that.
And by the way, I was thinking about this in my mind because they were a duo I was thinking of putting on together. So great minds think alike. I was going to have them as one thing because they're identical twins. They play the same position. They fill the same needs. So you're spot on. We will count that as a pick. The Murphy twins, I just love what they can bring, and you get 2 of them. Like, they're almost identical players. Like you mentioned, just generation of pass rush, long athletic guys. Like, these guys are, high-level athletes, 6'4", 6'5", edge rushers, low body fat, very quick first step. Granted, it was North Texas, but these guys can flat out play. North Texas is Division I. So getting them in the Pac-12 and just seeing what they're able to do in terms of generating pass rush, I'm really, really excited for that. I've got my next pick, man, and I'm really excited to see your thoughts on this one because I'm going in a similar direction that you went in. I'm going with pass rush. And the guy that I came back to, I almost forgot he was going to be on the roster because he was such a dud last year, Caleb Johnson, super senior. And, he's really had 2 dud years since he's been at UCLA. And it was 2019 and 2021. But that 2020 shortened season, he led UCLA in sacks. He had 5.5 sacks in the 7 total games we played. He was the most disruptive defensive player they've had. He hasn't had a sack in either one of those years, the 2019, 2021, at all. I mean, Mitchell Agude kind of came in and, stole his thunder last year, so to speak. Unfortunately, Agude in the transfer portal. But, he still had 45 tackles last year. An interception, did make a big play in the LSU game, I believe. But I just come back to that 2020 season, and I go, that's not an accident. You can regain that form. And now that Agude's gone, maybe this just opens the lane for kind of him doing something similar that we were able to see in previous years. I just am still high on Caleb Johnson, especially coming back for his final year of eligibility, knowing that he's basically, let's be honest, McGovern coming in, it's not going to change the scheme. It's going to be the same defense we've seen. So this is going to be his 4th year in the scheme. I just feel like he's bound to have another big year because it's make it or break it time. Like, after that 5.5 sack year, this guy was looking like a, NFL draft prospect. We do the Bruin Bible. This guy could have been drafted had he, built upon last year. Did absolutely nothing last year in the pass rush, which was his main job. Call me crazy, but I'm not off the Caleb Johnson train yet, and I think he can still do something. So this is a big spring for him, and I'm just pumped to see him. What do you think about Caleb Johnson, man?
Will, I like it. I really like it a lot. And you brought up some really great points about, he's like an EKG, for God's sakes, where it's high and then low and then high and then low. In terms of, he's sort of a cardiac arrest for Bruins fans who want to see more from him. And let me defend Caleb a little bit here. And I think that where things fell off last year was a lack of rhythm, because a lack of consistent looks that the defense gave. I think that there were sort of three waves last year defensively, where the first 2-3 games, we looked like we were going to be this very physical team up front, and we were going to play a physical brand of secondary ball, and be one of these teams that's really going to make you earn it in the trenches. And every once in a while, we might get beat deep, but that was sort of the price of admission, and we were going to really make things go. The Fresno State game sort of revealed something completely different, in that the secondary was now no longer an enabler to play physical defense, but rather a liability that we needed to hide. And so we really shifted focus last year, especially from a complexity standpoint. We were asking a lot more of our linebackers to drop back in coverage, cover a lot more ground, and also the defensive linemen, as a result, we're told not to sort of break containment as much, keep quarterbacks in the pocket, and sort of lose a little bit of their aggressiveness. And so that's where that mid-stretch defensively, where we really looked like, the circus was in town. It was just a lot of movement and not a lot of accomplishment. There was a lot of activity and not a lot of accomplishment. And it was really only until the last 3 games of the season, when we played Colorado, we played Cal, and we played ultimately SC after that bye, when we went back and just simplified the defense again. And it was just sort of base, it was sort of a sort of base scheme. It was sort of 4-2-5, but it was closer to a 4-3 really at the end of that season, in terms of how we went about doing our business, to just kind of simplify things. And then you saw that, things picked up again in terms of big plays defensively. And so there were these 3 very distinct seasons defensively, and I don't think Caleb Johnson ever really got into any sort of a consistent rhythm. And then when you couple that with the fact that Agude, while dynamic, and while I am going to painfully miss him, and I wish him all the success and all the best, and I've done that on Twitter, and I love the guy, and I'm going to be rooting for him at the next level as well. He wasn't always the most disciplined in terms of his spots and his gap responsibilities. And sometimes when you're sharing the field and competing with a guy like that, A, it can put you into bad habits, but B, it can also make you a little unsure of yourself of where you're supposed to go. This season, now that you have the Murphy twins, and now you're essentially going to get the same guy every snap, because they're going to sort of rotate with each other, or they're going to be on either side of each other in certain packages. You know what you're going to get more. And I think we as we talked about with Azizi Hearn and others, Kamari Ramsey and others, as guys who are a little bit more solid from a secondary standpoint, that's all to say I think there's going to be more of a sense of normalcy defensively. We're not going to have this wide variance. And I think that consistency ultimately is going to help Caleb Johnson, and also take some of the pressure off by going up with the Murphy twins in pass coverage. So I love the pick, Will, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
And just, from the standpoint, it was just a crowded linebacker room. Like,
yeah.
Jen Marquis transfers in, a guy that I was seriously considering adding to this list, Ale Kao, who I'm very excited about. He transfers in. Bo Calvert had a much bigger role than we expected. Agude made that jump. So, for that blitzing outside linebacker spot, he's getting like a third of the reps that we anticipated coming in. And now with Agude leaving, Jen Marquis leaving, there's an opportunity for him to kind of seize that role again. And I'm really, excited to see where he's coming at, because, we did the season preview last year, Ryan and I. This was the guy I was most excited about on the defensive side of the ball coming back. And it just didn't live up.
That's a great point, because think about this, right? If you're the 5th linebacker in a 3-4 scheme, you're the first rotational linebacker playing a real pivotal role. If you're the fifth linebacker in a 4-2-5, you're third string. Like there's a huge difference there schematically. And I think you bring up such an excellent point about how crowded the linebacker room really was. And all those guys, while they had great moments, they all suffered time to time from a lack of discipline and from a lack of sort of gap accountability. And I think that hurt Caleb, both on the field as well as from a reps perspective.
Yes. And, sky's the limit for Caleb this year. We are pumped in Bruin Nation to see what he brings to the table. Madman, we've gotten to our last pick. I'm really excited to see who your fifth is. You can go in a multitude of different ways here, but who ultimately is the fifth guy you're most excited about coming into spring practice?
Will, there's a number of different ways we can take this. There's sort of a few guys that could probably take this spot. For me, though, the one aspect, we've talked about pass rush, we've talked about secondary, we've talked about O-line, talked about the run game, we've talked about the home run pass game. To me, who's going to be the guy that's going to complement Kaz Allen in their ability to move the chains, right? You want to be able to have the home run guy and the big play guy and the DeAnthony, Percy Harvin guy. Who's going to be that guy that's going to get me the 7 yards on 3rd and 7 when I need it? Especially when you look at a guy like DTR who likes to build chemistry and will not necessarily be a guy who's going to trust his 4th and 5th read. And for that reason, Jake Bobo is someone I really have my eye on at 6'5", 74 catches last year at Duke, that ultimate possession receiver. He sort of is that perfect hybrid, truly, between Kyle Phillips and Greg Dulcich. He's got the length of a tight end in terms of height, but he plays like your prototypical possession receiver that is Kyle Phillips. And I think him complementing Kaz Allen, and if he can do so effectively, takes this offense to the next level and gives DTR that security blanket in tough 3rd down moments where he can sort of just drop it off to his guy, move the sticks, and then be able to kind of give the ball to Charbonnet, find creative ways for Kaz Allen, find creative ways for Cam Brown, but he's going to be the glue guy. And so for that reason, Jake Bobo is the one that I'm really got my eye on. Can he take that baton from Kyle Phillips?
3rd team all ACC receiver, ranked in the top 10 in the conference in yards and catches, 74 catches. Like, you're looking for experience coming as a transfer. Like, that's the type of guys you want, the instant impact players. Jake Bobo's a guy to get excited about. And like you mentioned, huge target. This guy's 6'5". That is a security blanket and a half. That is like those big Persian rugs, my man. Just you lay them out, it's right there for you. It's not going anywhere. Like, Jake Bobo is that for this football team, man. So I am thrilled to have Bobo in the locker room. That is a phenomenal pick. Last one, dude. I can go in a multitude of different directions as well. Devin Kirkwood is a guy that I'm really excited about. Big corner, 6'3". Like, are you kidding me? That's a guy I could go with. Darius Muwasu is a guy that I'm really excited about. This is a 2-time All Big West linebacker transferring over. 26 and a half tackles for a lost career, 270 career tackles coming in. I could even go Jaden Marshall, the guy that I feel like is going to take the baton from Kaz Allen. Like, you look at this guy's high school stats, he did it in every different way for them. He even threw 1 touchdown pass last year. He's 1 of 1 through the air, 90-yard touchdown. That's just what Jaden Marshall does, right? He's like an Odell Beckham type of guy at the high school level. But the guy that I'm going with is the quarterback that I'm really excited about for the future, and that's Justin Martin. I think this guy has the it factor, if groomed properly, to be the best quarterback in the Pac-12. And I know that is a massive statement to make, but this guy came from Inglewood. Like, he had no advantages in life. He's a pro-style quarterback. And when you think about the NFL draft, you have those dual threat guys, those Caleb Williams, those DTRs for that matter, right? The pro-style guys are always the ones with the highest ceiling because that's what it takes to succeed. And Justin Martin can do that in spades, my man. 13 touchdown game, went to 2 All-American Bowls. I tagged you in the video today of him just throwing. Yeah. That looked like an NFL throw to the sideline. Just the zip. He's 6'4". He's big. Bruin fans, I know we've been let down in the past. We expected big things from Brett Hundley after year one, and he was great. Didn't kind of fulfill what we wanted. Josh Rosen could not have been more hyped. I still believe in the guy in the NFL. It just won't happen for him. It's a guy that I'm going to die on that hill. Never really put together in Westwood. I think Justin Martin's going to be the guy to finally do it for Bruin fans. And, I love DTR. He's been very solid. I think Justin Martin could be a first-round NFL quarterback when all is said and done and have a great NFL career, which I couldn't say about, the other guys, listed. I truly believe that with Justin Martin. So that's the last guy I'm really excited about coming to spring practice. Graduated early. He's going to be on campus. So, man, that knocks out our top 10 list. Did we miss anybody? Is there anyone we left hanging, Madman?
No, Will, and the one thing I'll say about Mr. Justin Martin is I think it's a great pick, Will, and I think we all should be very excited about it for a couple of reasons. One is he's got that edge to him, and this is a Bruin show, but when you sort of, there's a little bit of some red flags with sort of Caleb Williams and his behavior in the offseason, where he feels a little too Hollywood, a little too, I'm here to kind of get my endorsements and get my bread and be out. And, when you look at a Justin Martin, it's all business. And the fact of the matter is, the chances of him seeing the field this year are pretty low. And the fact that he's out there and, it's basically him and Tom Brady out there making videos essentially on this gorgeous UCLA practice field, it just tells you kind of the disposition he's at. The second thing that's going to be very compelling is that it'll be the first time in Chip Kelly's history that he's going to have a pro-style quarterback.
I know.
And what he does with the talent that is Justin Martin and with that skill set and how Chip adjusts, his scheme and his game. A lot doesn't get talked about how much Chip evolved with more of a tight end friendly spread offense that was more bunch concepts. It was a very different look than what he had at Oregon. I look for sort of version 3 of that offense with Justin Martin. It's going to be must-see TV, and I absolutely sort of can't wait for him to be the next in line after DTR and potentially being in a position where he's going to be taking over the reins of a team that has had back-to-back at least 8+ win seasons, and now you're starting to build a pedigree and a library of consistent accomplishment. And so I love that pick. I think the one honorable mention here, Will, I'll say is the man who got the endorsement from Mercedes-Benz. And, the tagline of Mercedes is the best or nothing. And I'm hoping Mr. Cam Brown is going to be the best version of himself this year, or I'm going to take nothing else. I look forward to Cam Brown really challenging Kaz Allen for that wide receiver 1 position. I like Kaz Allen slightly more just because of a versatility standpoint, but it would not surprise me if Cam Brown really steps up and takes that wide receiver 1 slot. So that's a nice, fun battle to look out for in spring. But Will, I think this was a staggering list of 10/11/ a few more. But this was absolutely fantastic.
Just gets you excited for the season, man. And, LA Football Network will be covering all UCLA content moving forward. Tune in for our NFL draft show. This was a crossover episode. Draft is in session. We should have an episode coming to you guys tomorrow night. But Bruin Bible, we are officially out. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to the Madman for coming on as always. So much fun, man. Go Bruins. It's going to be a big, big year in Westwood.